The first time I saw him, I mistook him for another retiree scouring Crescent Cove Beach with a metal detector, chasing lost rings in the sand. Crescent Cove, a sleepy coastal town in California, drew folks like that. Old men hunting treasures, kids chasing crabs. But this man was no beachcomber. He crouched in the same dune patch for hours, sifting sand with surgical precision, ignoring shells or bottle caps, pocketing only oddities. A rusted earring, a hairpin, a child's plastic toy soldier. His hands moved like a machine, deliberate, obsessive. I didn't think twice about him until the day he pulled my car keys from the surf, dangling them like a prize. I met Carter, 26, a grad student renting a weathered cottage in Crescent Cove that summer. To finish my thesis on coastal ecology, days blurred together. Mornings typing at a wobbly kitchen table, afternoons strolling the shoreline to shake off writer's block, my sketch pad tucked under my arm for quick doodles of driftwood or gulls. The man became a fixture, a gaunt figure in a faded navy windbreaker, his face hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. Locals called him the Sandman, chuckling over their coffee at the diner. The nickname felt harmless, a quirky nod to a loner, until it wasn't. It started small, my favorite pen. A green fountain pen I use for notes, vanished from my beach bag. A turquoise earring, one I swore I'd left on my nightstand, glinted in the sand near his usual spot, half buried. I brushed it off as carelessness, the haze of thesis stress. But then my car keys disappeared. Not just any keys, a typewriter-shaped keychain, a gift from my late dad, irreplaceable. I tore apart the cottage, retraced my steps to the beach, heart sinking. There he was, ankle deep in the surf, holding my keychain, the typewriter charm catching the sun. Looking for this? His voice scraped like gravel, rough from disuse. I froze, sand cold under my bare feet. How did you? Finders keepers, he said, his smile too wide, teeth uneven. He dropped the keys into my palm, his fingers brushing mine, and walked away, humming a tuneless song. That night I found sand granules inside my locked car, scattered on the driver's seat like a calling card. My pulse quickened, the creak of the cottage's floorboard suddenly too loud. I told myself it was a fluke, old windows, a bad seal. But my hands shook as I double-checked the locks. The next week, my laptop charger vanished from the porch, only to reappear days later, coiled neatly on my doorstep, crusted with salt. A Polaroid slid under my door, the scrape of it waking me at dawn. It showed me asleep on the couch, my thesis papers scattered, time-stamped 3:17 a.m. My breath caught, the room spinning. I called the landlord, but he laughed. Seaside air messes with locks, Leah. I checked every window, every door, but the whisper of that photo lingered, like eyes on my back. The Sandman started appearing everywhere, outside the grocery store, in the library lot, always facing away, his posture rigid, like he was tracking me. I confronted him on the beach, voice sharp. "Why are you following me?" He blinked slowly, eyes gray like storm clouds. "You drop things, Leah. I'm just helping you find them." My stomach twisted at my name, unearned in his mouth. The breaking point came on a moonless night. I woke to the creak of my porch steps. Slow, deliberate. Through the blinds, I saw him in my yard, holding a full-size spade, its blade glinting under the street lamp. He wasn't sifting. He was digging. At the base of my avocado tree, dirt flying in sharp thuds. My hands shook as I dialed 911, whispering to the operator, my voice barely steady. He was gone by the time deputies arrived, their flashlights cutting the dark. They found nothing, their boots crunching on gravel, until I pointed to the hole. Shallow but fresh. The deputy's light caught my pen, the turquoise earring, and a Ziploc bag buried under the roots, stuffed with Polaroids. Dozens. Me buying coffee, laughing with the barista, asleep in my bed. My knees buckled, the rustle of plastic deafening. Another bag, smaller, knotted tight, held strands of dark brown hair. Mine or close enough. and a handwritten list. Things Leah has lost. My pen, my earring, my keys. And at the bottom, in fresh ink, her sense of safety. Soon, the deputy's radio crackled, his face pale. But the Sandman had vanished. No footprints, no trace. The cops called him a stalker. Said he'd studied my routines for months, picking locks, slipping through gaps in the cottage's old floorboards. The landlord found slits under the rugs, just wide enough for Polaroids. Proof he'd been inside, maybe watching me sleep. His motive was obsession, a need to collect. Not just trinkets, but pieces of me, my life. His finds a twisted claim over his targets. They never caught him. No name, no record, just the Sandman. A ghost who knew Crescent Cove's shadows better than its streets. I fled to the city, trading my sketchpad for deadbolts, checking locks until my fingers ached. My therapist calls it PTSD, but I call it survival. The scrape of that spade still in my ears. Last week, a package arrived. No sender. A jar of sand, grain spilling as I opened it. A note inside read, "You left something behind." At the bottom, glinting under the sand, was a molar tooth. DNA linked it to a college student. Vanished from Crescent Cove a year before I arrived. Her case cold until now. They're digging up the beach, sifting dunes for more. But I know he's out there, his windbreaker flapping, his hands still hunting. The city's hum can't drown the creak of those steps, his hum. I'm safe, they say. But the Sandman's still collecting, and my name's still on his list. The first thing I noticed wasn't the car itself. It was how the headlights in my rearview mirror seemed too bright, too close, cutting through the humid August darkness like searchlights. We'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes on Route 47, heading home from the outdoor concert in Millerville when those lights appeared. At first I thought nothing of it, just another concert goer taking the same back road to avoid highway traffic. But something about the way they sat perfectly centered in my mirror, never wavering, never changing distance, made the hair on my neck stand up. The summer air was thick and oppressive even with the windows down, carrying the smell of cornfields and that electrical tension that comes before a thunderstorm. My Honda Civic's radio crackled with static as we drove through dead zones between cell towers. "Turn that up," my best friend Maya said from the passenger seat, pointing at the radio. I think that's the band we just saw, but I was too focused on those headlights to care about music. I'm Jake Morrison, 24 years old, working construction in rural Illinois while saving money for college. Maya and I had been friends since high school, and the summer concert series at Millerville Park was our weekly tradition. Cheap tickets, good music, and a chance to forget about our dead-end jobs for a few hours. Route 47 was a narrow two-lane road that cut through endless farmland between Millerville and our hometown of Clearwater. During the day, you might pass a few tractors or farm trucks. But at 11:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night, it was usually deserted. Usually. "That car's been behind us a while," Maya observed, adjusting her side mirror. I'd been thinking the same thing. We'd made 3 turns since leaving the concert parking lot, including a deliberate detour through downtown Millerville to grab gas. The headlights had followed every turn, maintaining that same unnaturally perfect distance. "Maybe they're going to Clearwater too," I said, but my voice sounded uncertain even to me. I tested my theory by slowing down to 50 mph in a 65 zone. The headlights slowed with us, never getting closer, never falling back. Never falling back. When I sped up to 70, they matched my pace exactly. "That's not normal," Maya said, her voice tightening. "Normal people don't drive like that." The road ahead stretched endlessly into darkness. Nothing but cornfields on both sides, and the occasional farmhouse, set back from the road. No other traffic, no places to turn off, nowhere to go but forward into the night. I tried to see the vehicle behind the lights, but the headlights were positioned high. Probably a truck or SUV. And they were angled in a way that made it impossible to see anything else. Just those 2 blazing white circles burning into my retinas every time I checked the mirror. "What if we pull over?" Maya suggested. "Let them pass." It seemed logical. If this was just a coincidence, they'd drive by, and we could laugh about our paranoia. If it wasn't, I found a wide spot where a farm road intersected Route 47 and pulled onto the gravel shoulder. My hazard lights clicked rhythmically as we sat there, engine idling. The headlights stopped about 100 yards behind us. They just sat there, like two unblinking eyes watching us from the darkness. No movement, no attempt to pass, no sign of what kind of vehicle they belonged to. The lights were so bright that everything beyond them disappeared into impenetrable black. "This is really freaking me out," Maya whispered. I was freaking out too, but trying to stay calm. Maybe their car broke down. Maybe they're waiting for help. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Broken down cars don't follow you for 10 miles with military precision. We waited 5 minutes. The headlights didn't move. "Let's go," I said, putting the car in drive. "We'll go straight to the police station in Clearwater." But as soon as I pulled back onto the road, the headlights followed, and this time, they were closer. The speedometer climbed as I pressed harder on the gas. 60, 70, 75 on a road with sharp curves and hidden driveways. The headlights stayed with us, matching our speed perfectly. Sometimes so close I couldn't see them in my mirrors anymore. Just that harsh white glare flooding through our rear window. "Oh God, they're right behind us," Maya said, turning around in her seat. "I still can't see what kind of car it is. The lights are too bright." My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. The Honda was rattling at this speed, not built for high-speed chases through farm country. But the vehicle behind us seemed perfectly stable, perfectly controlled. That's when I realized whoever was driving had done this before. "Call 911, I told Maya. But when she tried her phone, there was no signal. We were in one of those dead zones that dotted rural Illinois, too far from any cell tower. Ahead, I saw the turn for Bridgewater Road, a narrow gravel road that led to an old grain elevator. If I could make the turn without them seeing it, maybe I could lose them in the maze of farm roads. I killed my headlights and took the turn at 69 PF, gravel spraying from my tires as we skidded onto the side road. The Honda fishtailed, but I managed to keep control. For a moment, I thought we'd made it. Route 47 stretched away behind us, empty and dark. Then I saw the headlights turn onto Bridgewater Road. How did they see us? Maya's voice was high with panic. "You turned off the lights." That's when I understood. Whoever was following us wasn't just some random road rager or drunk driver. They knew these roads. They'd been watching us, studying our route, maybe even waiting for us to leave the concert. This was planned. The gravel road was worse for my Honda than for their larger vehicle. I could hear rocks pinging against my oil pan, could feel the car struggling for traction. But behind us, the headlights were getting closer. "There," Maya pointed ahead, "the grain elevator. Maybe there's someone there." The old Bridgewater grain elevator loomed out of the darkness. A massive concrete structure surrounded by empty silos and abandoned equipment. During harvest season, it operated around the clock, but in August it was usually deserted. I pulled into the loading area and killed the engine. The silence was deafening after the roar of high-speed driving. We sat in the darkness, barely breathing, listening for the sound of gravel under tires. Nothing. "Maybe we lost them," Maya whispered. But I was watching my mirrors, and after a few minutes, I saw them. Two pinpricks of light moving slowly along Bridgewater Road, like predators' eyes searching the darkness. The lights stopped at the grain elevator entrance. We were trapped. The loading area was surrounded by tall concrete walls on 3 sides, with only one way out. If we tried to leave, we'd have to drive right past them. "The office?" I said, spotting a small building attached to the main elevator. "Maybe there's a phone." We crept toward the office, staying low, using the abandoned equipment as cover. The building was locked, but I managed to break a window with a piece of rusted rebar. Inside, I found an old rotary phone that miraculously still had a dial tone. I called 911 while Maya watched the entrance. 911. "What's your emergency?" "We're being followed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Someone's been chasing us for miles. We're at the Bridgewater grain elevator on..." The line went dead. Maya grabbed my arm. "They're coming." Through the broken window, I could see a figure moving between the grain silos. Tall, wearing dark clothes, carrying something in their hands. The headlights were still burning at the entrance, but whoever had been driving was now on foot, hunting us. "The elevator," I whispered. "We can climb up, get to high ground." The grain elevator's maintenance ladder led up the side of the main silo, disappearing into the darkness above. We climbed as quietly as possible, the metal rungs cold and slick with dew. From the top we could see everything. The entire complex spread out below us like a maze of shadows and machinery. The headlights still blazed at the entrance, but I could see the dark figure moving methodically through the buildings, checking each one. That's when Maya pointed to something that made my blood freeze. At the entrance, barely visible in the headlight glare, was a second figure, then a third. "There's more than one," she whispered. As if they'd heard her, all three figures stopped moving and looked up at the grain elevator. We were outlined against the stars, perfectly visible to anyone below. The figures started running toward the ladder. I don't remember climbing down, just the terror of knowing they were coming up behind us. We ran through the maze of equipment, concrete walls towering above us, our footsteps echoing off the metal structures. Behind us, I could hear them shouting to each other, coordinating their search like a pack of wolves. We reached my Honda just as the first figure rounded the corner. In the glare of their vehicle's headlights, I finally got a clear look at our pursuer. He was young, maybe early 20s, wearing hunting camouflage and carrying a hunting knife. His face was ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of person you'd pass on the street without a second glance. But his eyes were wrong. They held a cold intelligence that made it clear this wasn't random violence. This was sport. I started the Honda and floored it, spraying gravel as we shot toward the entrance. The other two figures tried to block our path, but I aimed the car straight at them, and they dove aside at the last second. We burst onto Bridgewater Road, doing 70 mph, tires smoking. And I didn't slow down until we reached the main highway. The police found the vehicle abandoned at the grain elevator. A stolen pickup truck reported missing from a farm 3 counties away. They never found the 3 men, despite an extensive search. The detective told us we weren't the first. Over the past 2 years, there had been 7 reports of vehicles being followed on rural roads around concert venues and festivals. 2 of those reports had ended with the victims simply disappearing. Their cars were found abandoned on back roads, but the drivers were never seen again. Maya and I don't go to concerts anymore. We don't drive alone at night. We both moved to cities where there are streetlights and traffic and people around. But sometimes, when I'm driving at night and see headlights in my rearview mirror that seem a little too bright, a little too close, I remember that ordinary face with those cold, intelligent eyes. And I wonder if they're still out there, still hunting, still playing their deadly game on dark country roads. The worst part is knowing that somewhere, on some desolate stretch of highway, they probably are. The first time we saw him, he was just a silhouette against the deeper black of the tree line, a smudge of darkness where the firelight didn't quite reach. That, and the sudden dead silence from the crickets. That's what got me first. 1 minute, the night was alive with their chirping. The next, nothing. Just the crackle of our campfire and the uneasy thump of my own heart. My name is Ethan. I was 17 that summer, the summer after junior year. Me and my 3 best friends, Liam, Maya, and Chloe, had scored the Holy Grail. Permission to camp out by ourselves for a whole week at Blackwood Lake. It's one of those sprawling state parks, miles of woods, a big, dark lake, and campsite space just far enough apart that you feel like you're the only people on Earth. We'd pitched our tents, a couple of cheap nylon domes, in a clearing right by the water's edge. Freedom. That's what it tasted like. The first night was all goofy teenage stuff. Bad guitar playing, burnt marshmallows, exaggerated ghost stories. Around midnight, Liam was in the middle of some ridiculous tale about a one-eyed lumberjack when Maya suddenly grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. "Guys," she whispered, her voice tight. "Don't freak out, but there's someone standing over there by the trees." We all looked, and there he was, just a shape, unmoving, at the very edge of the fire's flickering glow, too tall to be an animal. Definitely human. He didn't move, he didn't make a sound. He just stood there watching. A cold knot formed in my stomach. How long had he been there? And why did the woods suddenly feel like they were holding their breath? We tried to rationalize it. Another camper. Lost? A park ranger doing a late-night check? Liam, ever the brave one, cupped his hands around his mouth. "Hey, you all right out there?" he shouted, his voice sounding a little too loud in the sudden quiet. No response. The figure didn't even flinch. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute, it just melted back into the darkness, as silently as it had appeared. We didn't sleep much that night. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sounded like him returning. Probably just some local weirdo, Ben, another friend from a nearby campsite we'd met earlier, had said when we told him the next morning. But even he looked a little uneasy. The park rangers, when we mentioned it, just shrugged. "Kids sometimes sneak out here, or hikers get disoriented. If you see him again and feel unsafe, give us a call." Unsafe. Yeah, that about covered it. The next day we tried to shake it off. Swam in the lake, skipped rocks, pretended last night hadn't happened. But the feeling of being watched lingered, a greasy film over everything. Little things felt off. A fishing lyre Liam had left on the picnic table was gone. My ice towel, hung on a branch to dry, was found lying in the dirt a few feet away, as if it had been pulled down. Chloe swore she saw someone. Just a flicker of movement, watching us from the dense woods across the small cove while we were swimming. Am I just being paranoid? She'd whispered to Maya, but I saw the fear in her eyes. That night, our second night, we built the fire up bigger, kept our voices louder, a false bravado against the encroaching darkness. The crickets were silent again, and then he was there, closer this time, still just outside the main circle of firelight, but definitely closer. We could almost make out features. Tall, lean, dressed in dark, shapeless clothing. His face was lost in shadow, but we could feel his gaze, heavy, unblinking. We didn't shout this time. We just sat there, frozen, the half-told jokes dying on our lips. The air grew cold, heavy. After a long, terrifying moment, he turned, slowly, and vanished back into the trees. We didn't even discuss it. We scrambled into our tents, zipping them up tight, a flimsy nylon barrier against whatever was out there. I lay in the darkness, my heart pounding, listening to every tiny sound. Around 3 a.m. I heard it, a soft, dragging sound right outside my tent. Then, a faint, almost inaudible sniffing noise, followed by what sounded like a fingernail being drawn slowly down the nylon fabric, just inches from my head. I held my breath, paralyzed with terror, convinced he was about to rip his way in. After what felt like an eternity, the sounds moved away, towards Chloe and Maya's tent. I heard a muffled gasp from their direction. The next morning, we found it. Chloe's tent. 3 long, deliberate slashes running down one side, clean through the tough nylon, like a giant claw had raked across it. Her sleeping bag inside was undisturbed, but the message was clear. He could have gotten to them, easily. He chose not to. This was a warning, or a game. That was it. We were done. We packed up in a panicked frenzy, practically throwing our gear into Liam's beat-up old truck. We drove straight to the ranger station, our voices a jumbled mess as we told them about the Watcher, the sounds, the slashed tent. This time, they took it seriously. 2 rangers went back to our campsite with us. The slashed tent was undeniable. They searched the woods, found nothing. No footprints, no discarded items, no sign of anyone having been there except us. Could be a bear, one of them suggested, though the slashes looked too clean, too deliberate for an animal, or a transient. We get them sometimes, but his eyes didn't quite believe his own words. We left Blackwood Lake that day and never went back. The rest of the summer felt tainted. The memory of that silent figure, those cold, watching eyes, casting a long shadow. The police report was filed, but with no suspect. No real evidence beyond our terrified testimonies and a damaged tent. It just became another unsolved local incident. They never found out who he was or what he wanted. Was he just a disturbed local, getting his kicks from terrorizing campers? Or was he something more? Someone living out there in those deep, dark woods, protecting his territory, playing some kind of sick, predatory game with anyone who strayed too close. The tragedy the older counselors at Camp Clearwater used to whisper about. The one that supposedly happened at an abandoned camp on the other side of Blackwood Lake years ago. Was it connected? We'll never know. But sometimes even now, years later, when I'm out in the woods, or sitting around a campfire, I'll feel that old familiar prickle on the back of my neck. That feeling of unseen eyes. And I'll remember the silence of the crickets at Blackwood Lake. The way the firelight never quite reached the edge of the trees. And I wonder if he's still out there, that silent watcher, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting campers to arrive. His motives as dark and unfathomable as the forest night itself. The sound of children's laughter echoed across Pine Ridge Day Camp as I counted heads for the third time that afternoon. 1, 2, 3, 10. That's what my roster said. 10 kids in the salamander group, ages 7 to 9, but I kept counting 11. The extra boy sat quietly on the far end of the picnic bench during snack time, methodically eating an apple that definitely hadn't come from our camp kitchen. He was maybe 8 years old, with sandy brown hair and clothes that looked like they'd been worn for several days straight. When I asked the other counselors about him during our break, they just shrugged. Probably a day visitor, suggested Katie, the head counselor. Sometimes parents bring siblings who aren't enrolled, but something felt wrong about that explanation. I'm Jennifer Walsh, a 22-year-old education major volunteering at Pine Ridge for the summer to get experience working with kids. The camp sits on 50 acres of wooded land outside Portland, Oregon, serving about 60 children each day. We pride ourselves on safety, detailed check-in procedures, strict head counts, background checks for all staff. No child should be at this camp without proper documentation. When I first noticed the boy on Tuesday morning, he was sitting with my group during circle time, listening to our nature lesson about local bird species. He raised his hand to answer questions and seemed to know more about woodland ecology than most of the enrolled kids. "What's your name?" I asked him afterward. "Danny," he said quietly. "I'm just visiting. Where are your parents?" He pointed vaguely toward the woods. "They're around." I checked with the office, but there was no record of any visitor named Danny. No parent had signed in an extra child. The front desk staff insisted they would have noticed an unaccompanied minor entering the facility. Yet here he was again on Wednesday, appearing silently during our morning activities, like he'd always been part of the group. "Danny," I said, kneeling beside him as the other kids played capture the flag. "I need to talk to your mom or dad. Can you show me where they are?" His pale blue eyes met mine with an intensity that seemed wrong for a child his age. "They don't like to be bothered during the day. But honey, I need to make sure you're supposed to be here. It's for safety." "I'm safe," he said simply. Then he ran off to join the game, leaving me standing there with a growing sense of unease. That afternoon, I watched him more carefully. Danny knew the layout of the camp better than some kids who'd been coming all summer. He knew which bathroom stalls had broken locks, which trails led to the parking lot, which counselors were strictest about rules. He also knew things he shouldn't know. During lunch, I overheard him tell another boy, "Your mom's car is the blue one with the dent in the back bumper. She picks you up at exactly 4:15 and always brings you those cheese crackers you like." The boy, Tyler, looked confused. "How do you know that?" Danny just smiled and took another bite of his sandwich. I pulled Tyler aside later. "Has Danny ever met your mom?" "I don't think so," Tyler said. "But he knows lots of stuff about everybody. He told Emma that her grandpa has the truck with the fishing stickers, and he told Marcus about his dad's motorcycle. He's really smart, or he'd been watching, studying, learning the patterns of children and their families." Thursday morning, I arrived early and hid near the tree line watching the camp entrance. I saw every parent drop off their child, checked each one against my mental roster. Danny wasn't among them, but when I reached my group's meeting area, there he was, sitting cross-legged on the ground, waiting for morning circle to begin. "Danny," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "how did you get here today?" "I walked," he said. "From where?" He pointed toward the deep woods that bordered the camp property. "Back there." That's when I realized Danny might be living rough, a runaway or abandoned child who'd found safety and regular meals at our day camp. The thought broke my heart and terrified me simultaneously. But if he was out there alone, who was taking care of him? And why hadn't he asked for help? I decided to follow him. When camp ended that afternoon, I watched Danny slip away during the chaos of pickup time. Instead of going to the parking lot like the other kids, he headed for the hiking trail that led into the state forest. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding as the voices of parents and children faded behind me. The trail was steep and overgrown, clearly not maintained for casual hikers. After about half a mile, Danny left the main trail and pushed through a dense thicket of blackberry bushes. I waited a few minutes, then followed, the thorns catching on my clothes and scratching my arms. On the other side of the thicket was a small clearing where someone had set up a crude campsite. A blue tarp stretched between two trees, a circle of stones for a fire pit, and scattered around the area were items that made my blood run cold. Photographs, dozens of them, pinned to a makeshift bulletin board made from a piece of plywood. Pictures of children from the camp, clearly taken with a telephoto lens from somewhere in the woods. Pictures of parents dropping off and picking up their kids. Pictures of license plates and vehicles. And in the center of it all, a detailed hand-drawn map of the camp layout with notes, written in adult handwriting. Blind spots in cameras, fence week here, staff schedules. You shouldn't have followed me. I spun around to find Danny standing behind me, but he wasn't alone. A man emerged from behind the trees, tall, unshaven, wearing camouflage clothing and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Uncle Ray doesn't like visitors, Danny said, his voice flat and emotionless. My phone was in my hand, but I had no signal this deep in the woods. I was completely alone with a man who'd clearly been using this child to spy on the camp and the families who trusted us with their children. Danny's been very helpful, the man said, his voice rough from cigarettes. Smart kid. Learns quickly, tells me everything I need to know about your little operation there. What do you want? I whispered. Same thing anyone wants. Opportunity. He gestured at the photographs. Amazing how trusting people are. How predictable. Tommy's mom always parks in the same spot and leaves her car unlocked while she walks into the gate. Sarah's dad works nights, so her grandmother picks her up every day at exactly 3:45. The horror of what he was planning hit me like a physical blow. He'd been using Danny to case the camp, to learn the routines and vulnerabilities of dozens of families. Run, I told Danny. Run back to camp and get help. But Danny didn't move. He just stood there, watching me with those pale, empty eyes. Danny understands the arrangement, the man said. He gets fed, gets a safe place to sleep, gets to play with other kids during the day. All he has to do is pay attention and remember what he sees. That's when I understood the full horror of the situation. Danny wasn't just helping this man, he was trapped by him, probably for months or even years. I lunged for the map and photographs, trying to scatter the evidence, but the man was faster. He grabbed my wrist and twisted until I cried out in pain. You're going to walk back to that camp, he said, and you're going to forget you ever saw this place. Because if you don't, if you cause problems for me and Danny, I'll have to find new hunting grounds. Maybe somewhere with younger kids, maybe somewhere with less security. He released my wrist, and I stumbled backward, my mind racing. If I reported this, he'd disappear, and probably take Danny with him. But if I didn't, he'd continue using the camp as his target-rich environment. I want to help Danny, I said. Danny doesn't need help. Do you, boy? Danny shook his head mechanically, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. A tiny spark of the frightened child he really was underneath all that careful training. I made my choice. Danny, I said, looking directly at him. Tomorrow, during snack time, I want you to go to the office and tell Miss Katie that you need to call your Uncle Ray. Tell her it's an emergency. Can you remember that? The man started to object, but I kept talking to Danny. Tell her Uncle Ray said to call the number written on the back of the camp brochure. Can you do that for me? Danny nodded slowly. The number on the back of our brochure was for the county sheriff's office. I walked back to camp alone, my hand shaking so badly I could barely dial 911 when I finally got a signal. By the time police arrived at the campsite, it was empty. They'd vanished into the deep woods. But the next morning, Danny was there again, sitting quietly with my group during circle time, and when snack time came, he stood up and walked toward the office, just like I'd asked. They found him 3 hours later, hiding in a storage shed behind the camp kitchen. The man was gone, but Danny was safe. The investigation revealed that Danny had been missing from a foster home in Seattle for 8 months. His Uncle Ray was Raymond Morse, a convicted sex offender who'd been using the boy to scout potential victims across 3 states. Danny's in the new foster home now, getting the help he needs. Ray Morse was arrested 2 weeks later at a campground in Idaho, with a new stolen child and a fresh collection of surveillance photos. But I still wake up some nights thinking about those empty eyes, wondering how many other Dannys are out there, trapped between predators and the innocent children they're forced to watch, and wondering if next time, someone will notice the boy who isn't on the roster before it's too late. The flames of our bonfire licked at the night sky, casting long, dancing shadows across the sand. I remember how perfect that moment felt. The rhythmic crash of waves against the shore, the salt-tinged air, the laughter of friends celebrating summer's end. Our little circle felt like an island of warmth in the vast darkness of the remote beach, miles from the nearest house or streetlight. I was nursing a beer, sand between my toes, listening to my friend Jake tell an exaggerated story about his summer fling. That's when I first noticed the silence. It descended suddenly, like someone had pressed mute on the world. The constant background noise of waves seemed to recede, and the crackling fire grew quieter. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching against the sand behind me. I turned, squinting into the darkness beyond our circle of light. A figure emerged, tall and lean, dressed in jeans and a dark hoodie despite the warm night. Nobody recognized him, but he approached with the confidence of someone who belonged. "Mind if I join?" he asked, his voice surprisingly soft. His eyes caught the firelight as he scanned our group, finally settling on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Someone, probably Jake, always the welcoming one, motioned to an empty spot on the driftwood log. The stranger nodded and walked around the fire. But instead of taking the offered seat, he settled directly across from me, his gaze never wavering. "My name is Megan, and that summer I was 24, working a seasonal job at the Coastal State Park while figuring out my next move after college. The bonfire was our Friday night ritual, a way for the seasonal staff to unwind. We were a tight-knit group by August, which made the stranger's presence all the more noticeable. He didn't speak much at first, just watched, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. When offered a beer, he accepted with a slight nod but barely drank from it. There was something unsettling about his stillness, the way he seemed to absorb our stories without contributing, his attention fixed predominantly on me. "What brings you to our beach?" I finally asked during a lull in conversation, unable to bear the weight of his stare any longer. "I'm drawn to gatherings like this," he replied, his voice carrying clearly despite its softness. "People are most authentic when they think they're among friends," the way he emphasized. Think sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. As the night wore on, I noticed more details that set off alarm bells. The stranger never removed his hoodie despite sitting near the fire. His hands were clean, too clean for someone supposedly walking the beach at night, and he seemed to have intimate knowledge of the area, referencing local landmarks that tourists rarely knew about. When someone suggested we share ghost stories, the group turned to our visitor. "You must have a good one," Jake prompted. "New guy gets to go first." The stranger's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I don't tell ghost stories," he said. "I prefer real horror." The fire popped loudly in the silence that followed. "I could tell you about making people disappear," he continued, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. "Not in the magician's sense. Really disappear." The group laughed nervously, but I couldn't join them. Something in his tone made my heart race. "It's not about violence," he explained, leaning forward, the firelight casting shadows across his angular face. "It's about patience, about watching someone long enough to know their patterns, their weaknesses, about becoming so familiar with their life that you could step into it if you wanted to." His eyes locked with mine across the flames. "The trick is becoming a ghost in their life first," he continued. "Being seen but not remembered. A face they pass but don't register. Until the moment you choose to be remembered." No one spoke when he finished. The only sound was the crackling fire and distant waves. My friends exchanged uncomfortable glances, and someone quickly changed the subject. But the stranger's eyes remained on me, studying my reaction with clinical interest. Shortly after, people began packing up. The fire had died down to glowing embers, and the chill of night had settled in. I stayed close to my friends, helping gather empty bottles and fold blankets, acutely aware of the stranger's presence at the periphery of our group. "You need a ride?" Jake asked me as we walked toward the parking lot. I was about to accept when the stranger appeared beside us. "I'm heading toward town if you need a lift," he offered, those intense eyes fixed on mine. "She's good," Jake answered before I could, sensing my discomfort. "I've got her," the stranger nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Another time, then." Jake walked me to my car, waiting until I was inside before heading to his own. I watched him drive away, then realized I'd forgotten my jacket by the fire. Debating briefly, I decided to retrieve it. It was my favorite, and the night was getting colder. The beach was eerily quiet now, the bonfire reduced to glowing coals. I grabbed my jacket and turned to leave when I heard footsteps behind me. "Thought you'd left," the stranger said, materializing from the shadows. My heart lurched. "Just forgot my jacket," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady as I edged toward the path back to the parking lot. He followed, matching my pace. "You were uncomfortable with my story." "It was intense," I managed, walking faster. "But true," he insisted. "That's what makes it frightening." We reached the parking lot, now empty except for my car. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. "Hands shaking? Which one is yours?" I asked, hoping he'd point to a vehicle. "Any vehicle." "I walked," he replied simply. The implications hit me like a wave of ice water. There was nowhere to walk to. The beach was miles from town. I unlocked my car and slid inside, locking the door immediately. Through the window, I could see him watching me, his expression still unnervingly calm. As I started the engine, he stepped forward suddenly, placing his palm against my window. I jumped, finger hovering over the panic button on my key fob. "Don't forget me," he said, his breath fogging the glass between us. "I certainly won't forget you, Megan." I hadn't told him my name. I reversed quickly, tires spinning in the gravel, and sped away. In my rearview mirror, I could see him standing motionless, watching me leave. I drove well above the speed limit until the beach was far behind me, constantly checking the mirror for headlights. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I'd overreacted. He was just a creepy guy trying to scare us with his story. But when I got into my car to drive to work, my favorite seashell, a rare blue speckled one I'd kept hanging from my rearview mirror, was missing. In its place was a small, smooth stone I'd never seen before. I called Jake immediately. "Did you take my seashell keychain last night?" "What?" "No," he sounded confused. "Why would I do that?" I reported the incident to the local police, but they were dismissive. No crime had been committed. No direct threats made. They suggested I be more careful about locking my car. A week later, a girl from the neighboring town was reported missing. Her last known location was near our beach. The police canvassed the area, questioning locals about any suspicious activity. I told them about the stranger, but without a name or clear description beyond tall with a hoodie, they couldn't do much. I became hypervigilant. I varied my routes to work, checked my backseat before getting into my car, and stopped going to the beach entirely. My friends thought I was overreacting, but they hadn't seen his eyes, hadn't felt the deliberate weight of his attention. 2 weeks after the bonfire, I found a blue speckled seashell on my doorstep. Not my keychain. A different shell, but similar enough to send a clear message. He knew where I lived. I moved in with my sister the next day, 40 miles inland. I didn't tell anyone my new address, deleted my social media accounts, and changed my phone number. For a while, I thought I'd escaped. Then yesterday, 3 months later, I received a text from an unknown number. "The beach isn't the same without you. The fire's gone out. I've changed my number again, installed security cameras, bought a dog, but I still check my rearview mirror constantly, still scan every crowd for his face, because I know he's out there, watching, waiting for the moment he chooses to be more than a ghost in my life. He told me not to forget him. I haven't, and I don't think he'll let me. The first time I saw them, they were just dark heads bobbing in the center of Lost Man's Lake. Almost too far out to be certain they were even people, but it was the way they moved. Or rather, didn't move independently, that snagged the edge of my vision. Too synchronized, too silent, like a flock of water birds moving as one. Except there were no wings, just those dark shapes against the bruised purple of the dusk sky. And then, just as quickly as I'd spotted them, they were gone, slipping beneath the surface without a ripple. My wife Sarah was inside, unpacking. "Did you see that?" I'd called out, a strange unease prickling my skin. But when she came to the deck railing, the lake was just a vast, empty expanse of darkening water. Had I imagined it? Or was the isolation of this place already starting to play tricks on me? My name is David. Sarah and I, along with our 2 kids, 10-year-old Emily and 12-year-old Josh, had rented a cabin on Lost Man's Lake for a 2-week summer vacation. It was remote, the kind of place you find on obscure rental sites, promising unspoiled wilderness and total seclusion. The cabin itself was rustic, smelling faintly of pine needles and damp wood. Nestled deep in the Oregon woods, the only structure visible on the entire lake. The rental agent, a gruff local named Henderson, had handed us the keys with a curt, "You're the only ones out here. Cell service is spotty. Enjoy the quiet." His emphasis on only ones felt a little too pointed even then. The first few days were idyllic. Swimming, fishing, campfires. The kids loved it, but I couldn't shake that image of the swimmers. I'd scanned the lake at dusk, that strange liminal time when the light plays tricks. Nothing. Nothing. I started to convince myself it had been a flock of diving ducks, or just my city eyes, unaccustomed to the vast empty wilderness. Then, on the 4th morning after a night of heavy rain, I found the sack. I was down by our small, pebbly beach, sipping coffee, watching the mist rise off the lake. It was snagged on a half-submerged log near the water's edge. A large, heavy-duty canvas sack, the kind you see used for grain or construction debris. It was waterlogged, stained a dark, muddy brown, and tied shut at the top with a thick, knotted length of rough rope. It looked old and heavy, really heavy, a faint, unpleasant odor, like stagnant pond water and something else, something vaguely metallic, clung to it. My first thought was that it was just trash, washed down from some unknown upstream source, though Henderson had insisted Lost Man's Lake was spring-fed with no major inlets. Curiosity and a growing sense of unease made me try to drag it further onto the shore. It took all my strength. It was weighted down with something dense, shifting. I prodded it with a stick. Whatever was inside was solid, but lumpy, yielding slightly under pressure. Probably just full of rocks someone was using as an anchor, I told myself, though the explanation felt thin. Why tie it shut so securely? That night I saw the swimmers again. Dusk. Same spot, far out in the center of the lake. This time, there were more of them, maybe half a dozen dark heads. And they weren't just bobbing, they were moving in a slow, deliberate circle. Their movements perfectly synchronized. Almost ritualistic. No splashing. No sound. Just that silent, coordinated ballet in the fading light. Then, one by one, they slipped beneath the surface, vanishing without a trace. A cold dread washed over me. These weren't casual bathers. I started feeling watched, not just from the lake, but from the dense woods that pressed in on the cabin from 3 sides. I'd catch fleeting movements in my peripheral vision, hear the snap of a twig just beyond the tree line. Josh mentioned saying someone in a dark coat, watching him from the woods while he was fishing off the dock. Sarah said she'd found the back door of the cabin unlatched one morning, though she was sure she'd locked it. Am I just being paranoid? I kept asking myself, is this total seclusion getting to me? But the image of those silent swimmers, the weight of that waterlogged sack, the feeling of unseen eyes, It was all starting to coalesce into a suffocating sense of menace. The sack became an obsession. I couldn't leave it alone. I knew I should call Henderson or the park rangers, but the nearest ranger station was a 2-hour drive, and our cell service was non-existent. One afternoon, while Sarah and the kids were napping, I went down to the beach with a heavy-duty utility knife. My hands were shaking. The metallic, swampy odor from the sack was stronger now, almost gag-inducing. I took a deep breath and sliced at the thick, wet canvas. The knife caught on something hard, then tore through. I peeled back the rough fabric. Inside, packed tightly, were more canvas bags, smaller this time, also tied shut, and nestled between them, glinting dully in the weak sunlight, were tools. Not fishing gear. These were heavy, industrial-looking. What looked like a set of bolt cutters, a small, rusty hand winch, several lengths of heavy chain, coiled like sleeping snakes, and a collection of oddly shaped metal implements I didn't recognize, their edges sharpened, their surfaces stained with something dark. My stomach lurched. This wasn't an anchor. This was something else. Something used for work. Grim, silent work. A floorboard creaked on the cabin deck above me. I whirled around, my heart leaping into my throat. Henderson, the rental agent, stood there, his face a mask of cold, hard anger. He held a heavy, old-fashioned hunting rifle, pointed loosely in my direction. "Shouldn't have opened that, son," he said, his voice a low growl. "Some things are best left at the bottom of the lake." "What is this, Henderson?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What's in these bags? Lost Man's Lake has traditions," he said, taking a slow step towards me. "Ways of keeping things quiet, balanced. The lake provides, and sometimes the lake takes back." He nodded towards the center of the lake where I'd seen the swimmers. "They're the caretakers, the guardians. They don't like their work disturbed. The swimmers, the caretakers, the tools, the sack." It all clicked into a horrifying, unthinkable picture. This wasn't just an isolated cabin. It was a disposal site. And Henderson, the gruff but seemingly harmless local, was part of it. His motive wasn't just renting out a cabin. It was maintaining a dark, generations-old secret. "The people who rent these cabins," I began, the words catching in my throat. Henderson's smile was chilling. "Most folks just enjoy the fishing. Don't ask too many questions. Don't stay too long. The ones who get too curious, well, the lake is deep. And the caretakers are always watching." He raised the rifle slightly. "Then, Josh." Henderson's head snapped towards the sound. In that split second of distraction, I lunged. I tackled him low, hard, sending us both sprawling onto the pebbly beach. The rifle clattered away. We wrestled. A desperate, clumsy fight, his wiry strength surprising. I could hear Sarah screaming my name, the kids crying. I don't know how I managed it. Adrenaline, terror. I got the better of him, pinned him down. Sarah had found an old boat hook on the porch and was standing over us, her face pale but determined. We tied Henderson up with the rope from the cursed sack, then bundled the kids into our car. We didn't pack, we just drove, tires spitting gravel, not stopping until we hit the main highway and found a town with a sheriff's office. The investigation was extensive. Lost Man's Lake, it turned out, had been a dumping ground for a local criminal syndicate for decades, a place where inconvenient bodies and evidence disappeared without a trace. Henderson was part of it. A cleaner. His isolated rental cabins a perfect unsuspecting front. The swimmers, the caretakers, were his associates retrieving and disposing of packages delivered to the lake under cover of darkness. The bonfire on Crow Island was likely a signal, or a diversion. The sack I found was one such package, lost or perhaps deliberately left as a warning. The tools, they were for ensuring the packages stayed at the bottom. They dragged Lost Man's Lake for weeks. What they found there made headlines across the state. Henderson and several others were arrested. The cabin, the Heron's Nest, is now a sealed crime scene. Another dark chapter in the lake's grim history. We never went back to that part of the country. The unspoiled wilderness now holds a terrifying meaning for me. Sometimes, when I look out over any large body of water, especially at dusk, I see those dark heads, that silent, synchronized movement. And I wonder how many other lost man's lakes are out there. There's still waters guarding unspeakable secrets. Their depths patrolled by silent, watchful caretakers, waiting for the next curious guest to arrive. You don't expect to feel truly afraid at a crowded campground. Not with the hum of 100 voices, the glow of lanterns strung between trees, and the constant background noise of kids laughing, dogs barking, and radios playing classic rock. It's supposed to be safe. Just families escaping the city for a taste of nature. That's what I kept telling myself the night the family from Site 17 disappeared. It started like any other July weekend at Willow Pines Campground, just off Highway 9. My wife and I had driven up with our 2 boys, eager for a break from work and screens. We set up our tent, made s'mores, and chatted with the couple camping next to us. Ben and Amanda, with their daughter Lily. Across the loop from us was Site 17, a big blue and gray tent, a minivan. Bikes leaned against a tree. A family of 4. I remember the dad's sunburned arms, the mom's laugh, the kids' shrieks as they played flashlight tag in the dusk. That night, the campground was packed. Every site was full. Lanterns glowed late into the night as stories and laughter drifted on the breeze. I fell asleep to the distant sound of someone strumming a guitar and the closer, comforting presence of my own family, breathing softly in the tent. Sometime in the night, I woke to a noise, not an animal rooting around, not the wind, but a soft, rhythmic shuffling, like fabric brushing against fabric, or someone dragging something along the grass. I lay there, listening. It faded quickly, replaced by the usual symphony of crickets and frogs. I checked the time. 3:17 a.m., then drifted back into uneasy sleep. Morning came bright and noisy, as it always does at campgrounds. My boys woke first, eager to hit the lake. The smell of coffee drifted over from neighboring campsites. But when I stepped outside, something felt off. The space across the loop, Site 17, was empty. Not, the family is off hiking, empty. Completely empty? No tent, no chairs, no sleeping bags, just a patch of flattened grass, and a few deep, symmetrical grooves where the tent stakes had been. Their minivan was still there, parked at an angle, the windows fogged with dew. Bikes untouched. No sign of breakfast being made. No gear left behind. No gear left behind. At first, I thought maybe they'd packed up early, but the logistics didn't make sense. No one leaves before sunrise with 2 kids. And who takes down their tent but leaves their car and bikes? Amanda noticed it next. Where'd they go? She asked, frowning at the empty site. I shrugged, trying to sound casual. Maybe a family emergency. Maybe they got a ride out. But the more we looked, the weirder it got. No sleeping bags drying on the line. No coolers. Not even a stray water bottle. It was as if the tent had never been there at all, except for that odd, matted rectangle of grass and the faint impression of footprints circling the site, and then nothing. I wandered over to the camp host's trailer to ask if anyone had seen them leave. He shook his head, saw their lantern on late. Kids were still up around midnight. Didn't see them go. Car's still here, right? People started to notice. Whispers spread. The campground manager checked the reservation log. The family's name was Evans, Mark and Sharon, with 2 kids, ages 8 and 10. They checked in Friday, paid for 3 nights. The police arrived by noon. They searched the site, dusted the van for prints, looked for signs of forced entry or a struggle. Nothing. Not a torn zipper. Not a single drop of blood. No tire tracks except the ones from the minivan. The van was unlocked, keys on the dashboard, wallets, phones, and a half-eaten bag of trail mix on the front seat. I kept replaying the night in my mind. Did I really hear a noise, or had I dreamed it? I asked Amanda if she'd heard anything. She hesitated, then nodded. I thought I heard whispering, like someone talking close but trying not to be heard. I figured it was teenagers. The police canvassed every site. Nobody saw anyone leave or heard a car start. or witnessed anything out of the ordinary. One guy in a nearby tent said he woke up needing the bathroom around 3:30, but didn't notice anything unusual. Just that Site 17 was dark and quiet. By dusk, rumors were flying. Some said the parents had planned it, staged a disappearance. Others whispered about cult kidnappings or witness protection. The police brought in dogs to search the woods. Nothing. The family was gone, and all that remained was a patch of crushed grass and a growing sense of unease. That night, nobody slept well. The typical campground noises felt sinister. Every footstep, every snap of a twig seemed loaded with meaning. I lay awake, listening, trying to convince myself we were safe. The next day, the campground was crawling with cops and reporters. They questioned everyone, especially the folks closest to Site 17. I told them about the noise I'd heard, about the stranger than usual silence after. They logged my statement, but I could tell they didn't have much to go on. The Evans family never turned up. Not a single sighting. Their bank accounts went untouched. No ransom notes, no evidence of foul play. But no evidence they left on their own either. Their relatives were as baffled as the rest of us. Weeks passed. The story faded from the news, replaced by the next tragedy. But I couldn't let it go. I replayed every detail in my mind, picked apart every sound and shadow from that night. A month later, I got a call from the police. They were checking back, hoping someone remembered something new. I didn't, but I asked, did they ever find any evidence? The officer paused, then said quietly, "No. It's like they vanished into thin air. Life went on, but the memory haunted me. I started locking my doors at night, even in the middle of nowhere. I stopped camping, stopped trusting the safety of crowds. I felt watched, even in daylight. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see that patch of flattened grass, hear the faint shuffling in the dark, and wonder what I missed. I wonder if the Evans family is still out there, alive, lost, or something worse. I wonder if, that night, someone else was watching all of us, moving through the tents like a shadow, someone who could make a whole family vanish without a trace, while we all slept just a few feet away. And I wonder if, somewhere out there, another empty campsite is waiting for dawn."